from Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the SANDTON Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and is always available as a podcast on Apple, Google and Spotify. I'm Alexander Leitner and this is edition 100. That's it. The 100th edition of the SANDTON Times Hour. We're in week 5 and it is January 2023. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za or you can connect with us on social media @SANDTON Times or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. Send us your questions, your comments, and as always, you can be part of the conversation and you are part of the SANDTON Times Hour Nation. Thank you for joining me on this milestone this week. I come to you from the Norwegian Jade, just off the coast of South Africa, as you tune in from all around the world and the greater parts of South Africa. All is well in Sandton land, even though we find ourselves on a ship this week. Once again, things might sound a little bit different this week as I mark this major achievement of 100 weeks of the SANDTON Times Hour. And as I said, we are on a cruise ship navigating South Africa's coastline, and I guess there are a whole bunch of analogies and parallels that we can draw between navigating the vast oceans and reaching 100 significant miles on this show. But we've got so much content to cover, so let me keep going. Vincenzo will be making sure we sound as good as possible, and the logistics around this week's show, let me tell you, are quite something. But we're thrilled to be able to do this and to do something different and fresh for 2023. And like I said, we're marking a big one, so let's go big. If you're listening live on Mix 93.8 FM, don't forget you can connect with us on WhatsApp as well. And if you're listening to the podcast, well, please make sure you use all the usual channels, be it social media, email, or the like, and get in touch. Coming up on this week's episode, with several all-you-can-eat restaurants, bars and coffee shops, I'm going to be finding out a bit more from the man designated with managing all these outlets on a cruise ship. Then she's a well-known voice in British media for all things travel and cruising, and I get a chance to sit down with her to get an overseas perspective on cruising South Africa. Then next, she covers all things tourism and travel in South Africa and sits down with me to go through some of the numbers when it comes to cruising. Stay tuned. And finally, I'm joined by a media colleague from Spain to wrap up our week-long sailing adventure. All this and more coming up in the next hour. But instead of the headlines for this week, I want to give you a little bit of a temperature of what it is like on board this ship, as I'm joined by a fantastic group of media colleagues from all around the world. And when I say all around the world, we've had Israel, Italy, Spain, Britain, Austria, and the list goes on, which is really exciting. But let's raise the anchor on this show with a bit of music.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the SANDTON Times Hour
on your favorite podcast app now.
The best of talk and music in 1 hour. This is the SANDTON Times Hour.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM with Toto's Africa, the Stobinski disco remix. I think that's a fitting track for our journey around the coast of South Africa. And as promised, I wanted to give you a taste of what these few days on board a cruise ship have been like. And I boarded the ship in Cape Town with a group of international and seasoned travelers or media colleagues. And they're all also experts in the cruise space. And for me, it's a first time. Let me be honest, I've never been on a cruise ship before. I know it's been quite an experience for me. South African waters have to date been dominated by the likes of MSC cruises, which a lot of people will know. And this particular journey marks the start of multiple entries into the South African market by cruise brands from all around the world, which is actually really exciting for us as South Africans, especially from a tourist and tourism perspective. Now, the ship I am coming to you from is owned by Norwegian Cruise Lines, which is a US brand, and brings a very different kind of offering to our shores. So if you've only been familiar with one particular cruise line, you'll get to know as you start researching that there's different tiers and different cruise offerings, and it makes a big difference when you make your choices as to which cruise line you commit to, because it can be a very different experience and also very different budgets that you'll be working on, different price points you'll be working on. So the journey we're on at the moment takes us from Cape Town to Mossel Bay, Gqeberha, Richards Bay, and then we head off to Namibia, which is Lüderitz and Walvis Bay, to go see that as well. And as you can imagine, this is not only a great attraction for local but also international travelers, and unlocks such incredible economic opportunities for South Africa. More and more cruise ships seeking to visit our coastal towns. It brings money, it brings jobs, and it brings great feedback from some of the travelers I've spoken to, and we're going to chat about this in a minute as well on this show. Now, if you've never been on a cruise ship before, I'm sure you're thinking, so what is it all about? To really simplify it, imagine putting a hotel on a ship and cruising it around South Africa. It is very similar to going on holiday, I suppose, wherever you would go if you went to a resort or to a hotel, and yet it is also so different. And I do encourage you, if you've ever been playing with the idea of getting onto a cruise ship and trying it out, you should do it. And maybe a good start is to do it in your own backyard, and maybe it is a good start to do it for a few days. I must say 12 days feels like a really good length, because it feels like you've had a chance to fully enjoy and understand everything, and you kind of get into it after day 3 and 4. But also, if you want to try it out a little bit shorter because you're worried about things like seasickness, or you might not quite understand the experience, then shorter cruises are also available. I think there's a couple on offer between 3 and 5 days, and it is a good way to start, because the last thing you want is to fly to places like the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, commit to a much more expensive cruise, a much more involved cruise, and then suddenly you realize, hang on a second, day 2, day 3, this isn't for me and I'm not really enjoying it. So some of the things that you get to understand about cruising, I think we've spoken about this before on the show, is that you really unpack once. So you get onto the cruise ship, you board it, you get your room, you unpack once, and suddenly you get a chance to explore multiple different cities, but you never have to pack, repack, unpack, get on a plane or a train, fly, drive somewhere else, then do the whole thing all over again. And in some instances, especially like places that are smaller towns where you might say, look, to go visit that whole country might not be worth it, but I'd like to see that particular town. It's a great way of doing it, because the ship will dock every odd day in a different port, and you have a choice to get off the ship, do a shore excursion that the ship has organized that you can purchase as part of your ship package, or you can organize yourself. You can just put on your backpack, head out into town, or pre-book with a travel agent or a tour group in that country, and do it probably at a really good price as well, and explore some of the things you've always wanted to explore. There's so much to do on a ship. You can do game shows, there's entertainment, there's a theater show every single day, sometimes there's even 2 if you get lucky. There's a casino, there's bars, there's restaurants, there's food all the time, and this is probably also a bit of a problem. So to counter that, cruise ships are also quite big, so you get to walk around a lot, and if you really want to up the ante, you can even start taking the stairs and run up and down the stairs to get to your room and then to get to the next venue. It is unbelievably busy, it's unbelievably overwhelming if you've never done a cruise before, because when I first got on board, the first day was getting your room, getting your suitcases unpacked, then there was a muster drill, which is essentially a safety and security drill that they do in case something should happen on the ship. You know where to go, who to go with, what boat you're allocated, etc., etc. So they take you through the whole life vest exercise, and that's a really interesting thing to have to go through, and it's a bit like, I suppose, an elaborate safety presentation that they would do on aircraft. So if you've flown, you kind of know how that works, and you kind of then at least have got that done and dusted. It's ticked on day 1, and then it's the sail away party. So everyone gathers up on the deck where the pools and the jacuzzis are, and it's one big party as the ship sails out of port. In this instance, we sailed out of Cape Town. It was a glorious day. It was beautiful. People were swimming, people were drinking cocktails, and the party was on. They got a DJ on, and it was basically, it started then, it has probably never ended. And one of the things about cruising is that every single day on a cruise feels like a Saturday, because there's always a party going on somewhere, there's always food happening somewhere, there's entertainment happening somewhere. So it really is quite something. If you want to switch off, relax, and enjoy a great break, this is something you possibly want to look at and consider, apart from obviously the economic benefit that the country also gets, especially South Africa. And that's kind of the context in which we're talking about this today. Now, where to from here? Well, the cruise ship I'm currently on, the NCL, they're looking to build on this inaugural season that they've had in South Africa, and we'll be looking at deploying a new ship in 2024, because the season comes to an end around March in South Africa. So you're looking at about November to March every single year, that being the main cruise season where we see international cruise lines coming to South Africa. Once again, home porting out of Cape Town, but this time also looking to head to Mauritius. Reunion, Madagascar, Mozambique, and then also Richards Bay, Gqeberha, Mossel Bay, and Cape Town. There's also a bucket list trip that's also being planned from Cape Town to Barcelona, if you're into that kind of thing. So there's also something up the African west coast. And what's it been like so far? I mean, some of the smaller ports like Mossel Bay, Gqeberha, Richards Bay have been, for I think the South African contingent of media, interesting. I think there's still a lot that we need to do. Some of these ports are not fully equipped. I mean, like in Richards Bay, we parked right next to a coal dump because Richards Bay is designed, I think, mostly for import and export of industrial sort of commodities, etc. But it's work in progress. And if you see some of the benefit that the cruise business brings to South Africa and some of the incredible money that flows, especially also from the visitors that get off these ships, it is going to be interesting to see how a lot of South Africa's ports are going to gear up. And I think if I was a South African port, even if I was a small port, I'd probably start looking at how can I get a slice of that pie and start being part of that business that is coming our way. I think that gives you a great overview for now of where we're at. Wherever you go, whatever you do, there will be a South African somewhere. And I'm going to be catching up with one of those, Adrian De Kock, Food and Beverage Director on the Norwegian Jade, right after the break.
Follow the SANTON Times on social media.
At SANTON Times.
From Greater Santon to the rest of the world, this is the SANTON Times Hour.
Great, well, it's the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and available on all good podcasts around the world. And I'm thrilled to be joined by Adrian De Kock. He's the Food and Beverage Director at Norwegian Cruise Lines. And Adrian, you are one of the few South African faces that we've seen on this cruise.
Well, we have about 15 to 20 South Africans on board, in the gift shop, in the photo, the spa, sanitation, fire department. So
across the board, yeah? Well, what do you say percentage-wise? What does sort of the South African crew make up?
Some ships it can be 5%, some ships 1-2%.
Fantastic. Well, I want to come back to that just now because I think there's a great job conversation to be had about the opportunities that cruise ships offer South Africans, especially I know a lot of young South Africans wanting to get into the space, an opportunity to travel, an opportunity to be exposed. But let's talk about you. You are the Food and Beverage Director on the cruise. Give us a bit of context as to what your role entails. What do you look after every day?
I look after all the bars, mostly on turnaround day, make sure all the provisions come for bars, food, restaurants, everything to do with health, safety in our areas, the bar. I have on this ship, about 540 staff underneath me that I help supervise.
Wow. And in terms of restaurants, I mean, I think you've got about never mind all the smaller outlets, but there's probably like 6 or 7 main restaurants. Then there's the smaller bars, the snack spots. It's quite a bit to look after.
That's a lot. That's why we have like a bar manager, we have a restaurant manager, we have a sanitation supervisor, we have provision master, then we have executive chef. They will all run their jobs. I overlook it. When they send me an email, I would check to see if they're doing what's right.
A cruise is often referred to as like a hotel or a resort on the ocean. And most people probably understand generally what a hotel or a resort could be looking like in terms of a structure. What does that look like on the ocean? So you've got the captain who's the captain of the ship. And then how does the structure fall from there? How does it all filter through?
Then you get the engine department, but if you're looking at the hotel department, the captain's the commander, then you get the hotel general manager, then you'll get me, the F&B director on a smaller ship. If it's on a bigger ship, you'll have the GM, assistant GM, and then you'll have the food and beverage director, then you'll have assistant food and beverage director. And then it goes down to restaurant manager, bar manager, executive chef.
I think the expression is right. I mean, you've got quite a ship you have to run here. A lot of people, both on staff and passengers as well. How did you end up getting into this job? How long ago was that?
1998, if I'm right. I started off as a busboy. And then I worked my way up to be waiter, first assistant waiter, then a supervisor, then an assistant maitre d', then a maitre d', then a restaurant manager, then an assistant food and beverage manager, then a food and beverage director.
And would you say that's generally sort of the career path in this business?
In this business, yeah.
And then do you study anything? Do you have to do any particular qualification that you can sort of move up the ranks? Or is it purely based on experience as well?
Based on experience, and some areas, it's good to also study.
Okay.
In food and beverage director, there's study courses that you can do in America, which people go to schools for and that.
Okay. Now that there's so many cruise lines coming into South African waters, I mean, it seems like there's great interest around the world to visit South Africa. It's obviously opening up great opportunities for South Africans to come on board. What is your general advice to somebody who wants to come and work on a ship, who's a young South African who's interested in this and who wants to get to a role that you have in years to come? What's sort of the best way of approaching it?
First of all, you got to be committed in staying away from home. Second of all, you got to love what you do. If you love working at sea and love your job, being a waiter or being any specific job that we do out at sea, like you could be a singer, you could even be a dancer, you could be a cook. As long as you enjoy your job and staying away from home, it's a great opportunity.
You've had some incredible experiences, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, amazing
during this career. I mean, can you share some of those? I mean, what's some of your highlights of your career?
Well, I love rough sea.
Tell me what is a rough sea for those people who consider maybe the roller coaster ride at Gold Reef City rough. How rough is a rough sea?
Well, when you go to Cape Horn, rough sea on a small. I was with Seaborn Sun on a leisure cruise ship, which only takes 250 guests, so that's small. And when you're out at waves that are 40, 50 feet, you can feel the rocking and stuff sliding around and getting your balance. We always tell the guests, maybe it's best to have one drink and then you don't notice
to counterbalance.
To counterbalance.
Wow, but I mean, what are we looking at there in terms of degrees? How much are we talking about the ship
listing,
moving?
I think it's only allowed to list about 15%, if I'm right. I'm not the engine side of things, but it shouldn't be more than 15 or 20%. Otherwise, the ship will topple over.
My gosh.
But then they have stabilizers on the side of the ship and balancing, where the tanks flush water in to counterbalance the way the ship moves.
So would you? I mean, you're just talking about Cape Horn. Would you say South African waters are particularly hazardous compared to other parts of the world?
I've been to every place that has the word Cape. Seems to have this problem. Cape Horn, Cape Cod, Cape of Storms, Cape Town.
Wow, yeah, and then there's the Wild Coast as well, which wasn't too bad. I must say, we've now done the Horn of the Cape. We've kind of gone all the way now to Richards Bay, all the way back again. We'll see how that goes to Namibia. And there was a bit rough water, I think, just outside of Hermanus. It was a bit choppy compared to the rest of the cruise, but it's been great.
No,
otherwise, I mean, is that like a good day on high sea?
That's pleasure.
That's a pleasure cruise. Amazing.
But what's also amazing, I've been through Norwegian fjords where we saw whales and orchids on the side. I've been in the glaciers in Canada, in Alaska, and amazing whales jumping out, catching the fish right next to the ship. I remember the one time going through the fjords, the ship had to stop from going forward to allow a bear to swim across before we can continue. Where do you get to see things like that? In Alaska, it was amazing. Get off the ship, walk a kilometer, and you're in the forest, and you can see the bears walking around, and you're with a tour guide, and they say, just leave them, they'll carry on doing their own thing.
Well, Adrian De Kock, Food and Beverage Director at Norwegian Cruise Line, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I thank you for making the time to chat to us on the SANDTON Times Hour.
You're welcome, no problem.
It's the bottom of the hour. It's time for a quick musical break, and we'll be right back after this.
Promote your brand. Advertise your business.
Our audience could be your next client. Contact the SANDTON Times today.
Back for more?
The SANTON Times Hour continues.
You're listening to the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and available where all good podcasts are found all around the world. That was Enya with Orinoco Flow, Das Neue Schwarz Remix. If you just started listening, this is the second half of the SANTON Times Hour. My name is Alexander Leipner on board the Norwegian Jade this week off the coast of South Africa. And if you're listening for the first time, well, if there's anything that you enjoyed during the show but didn't manage to jot down all the details, be sure to visit the show notes on www.santontimes.co.za for a detailed breakdown of everything discussed on this week's edition. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at SANTON Times and feel free to engage. Send a tweet, a WhatsApp, a DM, a voice note, and this week possibly even a message in a bottle. Whatever works for you. You can also use hashtag SANTON Times Hour. Now, I'm not somewhere in the Indian Ocean on my own, but I have the most delightful group of media colleagues with me from all around the world, one of which joins me right now. She's Sara Macefield, freelance journalist who writes for the national papers like the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Mail, writing for 15 years. And Sarah, it's great to have you join me on this segment of the show.
Oh, thanks, Alex. Great to be with you.
Sarah, you were in South Africa last, I think I tried to work it out, so 1995, that's just over 25 years ago.
Yes, it was a long time ago, but very enjoyable, and actually being here now has sort of brought back those memories.
How have things changed since you were last here?
Oh, goodness. Well, it's slightly difficult to compare because when I was here before, I flew into Joburg, took the blue train, I think it was the blue train, down to Shamwari. And from what I've seen of Shamwari, that now seems much bigger and, you know, a much more developed resort, whereas it was more of a sort of, I think, a homely, rustic, family-run resort when I was there. In terms of Cape Town, for example, I was only there very briefly before, so it's very interesting for me to stay overnight at the beginning of this trip and go to the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, which was much bigger than I realised, actually. You know, and I was very impressed with that. I thought that was a really good tourist area, lots of places to go and eat on the waterfront. And for Brits, especially Brits like me, escaping a cold and rainy British winter, this is just delightful with the weather that we're getting, and I can see it appealing to a lot.
Well, we're 1 week down into our cruise of the South African coastline. What's been your impression so far of South Africa?
Well, oh goodness, I love Africa and I love South Africa. There's something about it that gets in your soul. And when you come from a northern hemisphere country like Britain, and you're coming in and you're sort of seeing how the scenery is, how the people live, and the wildlife. You're seeing creatures that you would normally see in England in a zoo, and that is quite mind-blowing for a British person, I think. I guess some of the ports, so like Richards Bay, I guess I'm surprised at when I opened the curtain this morning and seeing the piles of coal. So it's a little bit industrial, not the most scenic. But heck, it's just gorgeous being here, you know, and getting in the safari vehicles. I'm just back from an excursion today. It's just such an adventure. It's wonderful.
So what are some of the perceptions and the headlines dominating in the UK right now when we look at South Africa? What's the narrative that's kind of floating about when you hear about South Africa?
Okay, I mean, South Africa, goodness, is seen as a beautiful country, lovely people, a lot to see. These are the positives, great value for money. I think the overriding factor that would always concern people is crime, their levels of crime. You hear about things, about corruption as well, maybe in political circles, but obviously that doesn't affect tourists so much. But I think it is the crime and people being afraid of perhaps exploring on their own or ending up in a situation where they're somewhere where they could feel very vulnerable and unsure. And again, I think that's where cruising is so good. On this particular trip, as I said, we stayed in Cape Town for a night beforehand. It's all been very seamless. We're going back to Cape Town tomorrow and staying another night. And I think a cruise is an excellent way because it offers the security. And particularly maybe if people are a little bit older, or you're travelling with children, or ladies travelling together, it offers that security. And you also have the organised excursions as well. And another thing at the moment, it's so cheap for us Brits. It's such good value for money. We had a meal out on the waterfront on Saturday. It was equivalent to £15, and that was for 2 or 3 courses and drinks. You'd never get that back home. Not even in a pub.
So if I hear you correctly, it's an attractive proposition for many people.
Definitely. And coming at this time of year, as I said, with the climate and everything else, it really is. I mean, obviously it's a long way 12-hour flight from London, but there's not a great time difference, so that means there's no jet lag. So again, that's another plus factor. As I said, I think it is the crime, which I think people do associate with South Africa, and every time there is an incident, if it gets reported internationally, that is something that will worry people. But having said that, Cape Town, which is where this cruise started and where it will finish, is seen as somewhere that is safer. So I think people would feel more confident.
I mean, and maybe just to add to your thing about the crime, and the other thing that a lot of people will get isolated from when they're on a cruise is load shedding, which is another bit of South African inventiveness that we're having to deal with. We haven't had load shedding now for a whole week.
I wasn't even aware of this before coming to South Africa this week, and I thought, load shedding, what is this? And then I just thought, oh, it's power cuts, power blackouts. And yes, you're right, you are completely sort of shielded from it by being on the ship. So I think that is another good thing as well, because to be honest, it's not something we're used to.
So what do you think South African destinations are getting right, and what do you think they are getting wrong? Like, what do they still need to work on?
Well, obviously, I was only in the South African destination for a short time before getting on the ship, and then obviously it's been very much the Norwegian Cruise Line product. I would say service levels. Service is friendly. It can be a little bit odd at times. Sometimes the waiting staff don't seem to want to take your order, or they seem a bit puzzled when you do want to order, and the service does generally seem to be slow. But the people are friendly, the people are good. Again, I'd probably be able to answer this question better when I go back at the end of the trip, because then I'm probably going to go out and try and get to Table Mountain and perhaps see how some of the tourist products work. But they do seem to have the structure. You know, I have seen the red hop on, hop off bus, and obviously going up to Table Mountain, they've got the cable car. You know, there are some good attractions, you know, in Cape Town. There are a lot of things to see, but as I said, this impression, service, I have noticed that the service is slow.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I think that's some good feedback, and especially if you want to compete on the global market, it's important to be competing at the same level as so many other destinations.
Yes, and also another thing as well is that if people are doing a cruise and then they're doing a land stay either side of it, the cruise lines pride themselves on having good service and efficient service. So if people have been on a cruise ship where the service has been like that, then they're going to notice the contrast even more. So yeah, I think it's something with more training, you know, that could easily be resolved, to be honest.
Sara Macefield, freelance journalist, writing about cruising for 15 years and in the tourism space. I thank you for making the time to be on the SANDTON Times Hour. It's been so great sharing this voyage with you over the last couple of days.
Thank you very much, Alex. I've enjoyed it too.
Online, on air,
Anywhere, anytime.
this is the SANDTON Times Hour.
Our voyage on the sea continues, and here to bring in a local perspective, I'm joined by Adele Mackenzie. She's the editor of Travel News Weekly and Tourism Update. Adele, thank you for tearing yourself away from the cocktails.
Absolute pleasure.
So how have you enjoyed cruising South Africa's coastline for the last couple of days?
I've absolutely loved it. I've loved the fact that, you know, we speak about a girl in every port. I have family and friends in every port, and I've been able to travel from Cape Town to Durban and see friends and family along the way, which has been wonderful. We have so much to offer. I'm such a proud South African in terms of our tourism offering, and it's nice to be able to see people from all over the world enjoying that as well.
Well, we're going to dive into some of the stats as well, because I know you've pulled up some stats for us in terms of what cruising is looking like in South Africa. But I mean, up until now, we've had the likes of MSC offering cruises in South African waters for many, many years.
Yes.
But it seems like things are about to get shaken up with a whole bunch of new entries, new cruise ships, other offerings coming into the market.
Yes, absolutely, and it's good to see. Competition is always healthy. Competition was always good. Yes, it's different levels of cruising as well. MSC has always sort of offered the basics, and NCL Norwegian Cruising is offering a little bit better, a higher product, and I think it just encourages the people in the market already to step up the game a bit, and to perhaps bring in newer ships, and to perhaps bring in more offerings. So yeah, I think it's a good thing, and it's great to see, and it's massive opportunity for South Africa.
Well, I suppose a very fitting phrase would be a rising tide raises all ships, right? So new entrants coming into the market is going to definitely change the product for everybody.
Absolutely.
I think everyone's going to have to up their game.
Absolutely.
Everyone's going to have to start offering a better product, a more exciting product, a more value for money product.
Yes.
And there seems to be a growing demand by international cruise lines to explore the South African coastline. What do you think is driving the sudden interest in South Africa?
I think Africa has always been, and specifically Southern and East Africa, have always been popular destinations. I mean, we were reaching incredible figures by 2019. But the fact that there are considerations post-COVID, one being safety, one being safety in terms of health and hygiene safety. And you know, we have South Africa, and Africa has so much of great outdoors activities. We went on, for example, you know, the outdoors wine tastings and the game drives and that kind of thing. It's just naturally, and cruising is also starting to cater for all ranges of people. So whether they be families or single travelers or couples or multi-generational families.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Let's get into some of the stats. I mean, you've pulled up some stats in terms of cruising. What is it doing for South Africa? What kind of numbers have you got for us?
James Fuss, who's the mayoral committee member for economic opportunities for the city of Cape Town, is very strongly, along with Westgrow, really strongly driving the cruise strategy. And he says that cruise liners bring in an average of 100 million rand in spend per port visit, which I think is quite substantial.
That is remarkable. I mean, if you think about, we stopped off in Mossel Bay the other day, which is a small town at the best of times. I know December gets a bit ridiculous. I think our tour guide was joking about Mossel Bay being a town of 100,000, and then when Johannesburg comes down, it's 4 million.
Yes.
But I mean, that kind of money for a small town like that is significant. I mean, that is really a game changer.
Completely a game changer, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And the benefits could be so much broader, so much wider. For the government's pushing the diversification of the tourism industry quite a bit, making sure that it's not just that sort of golden triangle, which is Johannesburg, Cape Town, Vic Falls kind of things, sort of making sure that the smaller towns also benefit.
Yeah.
And I think cruising could be a big part of that.
Well, it's an interesting conversation because at the moment it looks like Cape Town and Durban are the main terminals, the main ports that have terminals that can handle the kind of cruising that we're talking about coming out of Miami, out of Barcelona, out of some of the major ports in the world that handle cruise ships.
Yes.
The other towns like Gqeberha, Mossel Bay, maybe not so much. It's a little bit of an exercise. Richards Bay, we're kind of having to park in between coal piles to kind of get international tourists to come see parts of KwaZulu-Natal. But it is a bit of a chicken and egg situation. So if government isn't putting investment into building those terminals, cruise companies are saying, well, it's not such a great product for us to offer. But if they're not committing to visiting those ports regularly, government's going to say, well, we're not going to build these terminals, and then they just stand here and nobody comes to see it.
Yes.
And then with that come the shore excursions, right? So the shore excursion, the travel and tour operators are not going to offer a better product or a better service if they don't have that constant flow of tourists. And it's a bit of a value chain that needs to be built up now.
It is, but somebody needs to take the initiative because there really is massive value. And what a lot of the private sector tourism players are realizing is that they often have to take, and some of the government entities are even saying that, take the initiative, show us what this could do to change the economy. James Fuss also said every 12th cruise passenger, one job is created.
Incredible.
And those kind of stats is what government needs to start realizing and start changing. Walvis Bay, for example, was a tiny, tiny port. And it realized the potential of cruise tourism as well as obviously as of cargo, and it's doing exceptionally well.
Incredible.
I think there are some nice stats in terms of how things are doing. Durban's just built that 200 million cruise terminal, and there's massive development going on at the point. including there's shops and restaurants and a nice retail section. 34 ships are expected at Nelson Mandela Bay over the cruise season, which is 45,000 passengers, looking at a value of revenue of about 55 million in revenue. So, that makes sense. Cape Town has 75 cruise ships arriving until the end of the cruise season in March, and they're looking at double that.
Incredible. Yeah, it's quite remarkable. I mean, South Africa also seems to be gearing up for the business of ships in general. I mean, I hear that there's talks of building shipyards and maintenance yards where ships can be built and reconstructed or fixed at least. Absolutely. So all the provincial as well as some of the national leaders are talking about that, have been speaking about that for a while. Two ports specifically that are looking at that include Nelson Mandela Bay as well as Cape Town tourism. We're a long haul destination in terms of cruising as well, so it sort of makes sense for when the cruise ships come in for a bit of maintenance this side. And probably at a very good and competitive price. At a much better price. Absolutely. Well, there you have it, Adele Mackenzie. She's the editor of Travel News Weekly and Tourism Update. I thank you for making the time to be on the SANTON Times Hour. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Connect with the SANTON Times. Email editor@santontimes.co.za.
It's a good question because lots of people have asked us that, what are you going to do going forward?
That's a great question.
It's a critically important question.
Such a great and interesting question.
I had not even thought about that until you've just said it.
You're listening to the SANTON Times Hour.
You're listening to the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM and available for your listening pleasure on a myriad of podcast platforms from all around the world. That was Julio Iglesias with A Moonlight Lady remixed by Tristan Muchuano. I hope you're still sounding all right. Yeah, we're all good. Fantastic. Well, as I wrap up the 100th edition of the SANTON Times Hour, I'm happy to do so with another fellow passenger who joins me right now. Javier Ortega Figueiral is a journalist from Barcelona, Catalonia in Spain. Initially, he was specialized on aviation affairs, and he expanded his journalistic field as an expert in maritime and port affairs of all kinds. He's also a writer on hotels and historical topics, and he also works for the main newspaper La Vanguardia, which was founded in 1881, and also for Forbes. He's also a contributor to other print, digital, radio and TV media in Spain, and he is a lecturer on aeronautical and maritime issues. And Javier, I hope I pronounced half those names right.
Everything you said, yes, fine. Perfect. Perfecto, as we used to say.
Fantastic. Well, Javier, you're visiting South Africa.
Yeah.
You are from Spain. I mean, a country that is not unfamiliar with traveling the seas. I mean, you have a very long history of getting onto boats and traveling all around the world as a nation. What's been your impression like traveling South Africa's oceans?
Traveling to South Africa, for me, it's like living a dream. Because it's not very normal for a person who lives in the Mediterranean Sea, by the Mediterranean Sea, to sail around this beautiful coast and beautiful places during these days. Fantastic country, fantastic people. We are having such a nice experience.
Fantastic.
Making this cruise. As you know, the Mediterranean, the cruising in the Mediterranean has been there since the very beginning, as an industry from the 60s, after the liners going transatlantic, doing transatlantic travels has stopped. Then in the Mediterranean we have plenty of ports, interesting ports, so the cruising industry there is very developed. So the people most of the Europeans are cruising quite often, but for our market, for we Italians, French, Spaniards, and so on, it's a very exotic thing to come here, to come down geographically speaking, to come down here to South Africa, and I can talk for myself, but I'm amazed of what are we seeing these days here.
Well, you travel a lot around the world. I mean, like cruising is one of your topics that you're very interested in. What are generally the trends at the moment in terms of cruising worldwide? I mean, South Africa is a new player in a very well-established cruise market.
As soon as the luxury companies will discover, they have discovered your market already, but as soon as they will discover that this is an amazing place to base their ships for some months during the year, during the season or during a year, it would be a fantastic success for all those companies. So on cruising, nowadays, the luxury or ultra-luxury brands are developing faster than let's say, the regular ones. So, for instance, we are traveling on Norwegian Cruise Line. That is a mid-scale to up cruise line, and it's developing very well. And Norwegian Cruise Line has presented last year a new ship that is Norwegian Prima, that is much bigger than the one we are traveling. We are on Norwegian Jade, as you probably are saying these days, obviously. And the companies are going to develop to democratize the luxury. I don't know if it's understandable, this thing. So you can get more things for a decent price. And this is what the companies are doing nowadays. So in the mid-scale to upscale things, luxury is getting more democratic, and on luxury and ultra-luxury brands, things are going faster and faster, because there is that feeling that luxury is not a thing that you can touch, but luxury is travel, luxury is to have experience and all that, and this is why the cruise industry is growing so much lately.
Well, it's an interesting point that you make, and before I carry on, I'm just going to mention in the background, if you're hearing some clanking noises, we've just hit some pretty rough waters. I think the captain was saying 3.5 meters.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah. So if you do hear some clanking in the background, it is Africa, it is African oceans, and it's not for sissies. So we're all hanging on to where we can to stay straight or not full of our chairs. But I'm interested to hear that you're saying luxury and ultra luxury and mid-range, because a lot of people, when they look at cruising, and if you've never been exposed to a cruise ship, don't realize that there's different tiers and different opportunities that you can get in. You've got the mass market ship. So basically, the bigger the ship, the more affordable, the more mass market it is. The smaller it is, the more luxurious it is, right?
We can compare the cruise industry with the hotel industry. So you can rank ships by stars. This is not an official thing, but you can rank the ship by stars. So there are 5 stars ultra luxury ships, then are 5 stars, then 4, 3, and 1 star ship. They didn't exist. A 1 star ship is like a ferry ship going from one point to the other. But we can divide this industry in levels on prices, on how big is the ship, and you can also can count on how luxury is a company by counting if the number of passengers is equal to the number of crew. It means that, for instance, a small ship, when we say small, is like a 300 passenger ship, has a 300 crew, and we can add some guides to the destinations and so on. This is one thing that is the measure of luxury. The other thing is how many square meters there is per passenger on general areas like salons, on the swimming pool and the sports deck and all that. This is also another measure of how luxury is a brand company or is a ship.
Well, that's it for another SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 FM, on location on the high seas, the 100th edition done, and thank you to all of those who've been coming along for the journey. As always, there is way more to come. And if you want to get in touch on this podcast, well, you can email editor@santontimes.co.za. You can visit the SANTON Times on social media and visit the website www.santontimes.co.za. And don't forget, you can also subscribe on podcasts on Apple, Google, and Spotify. And feel free to send through your questions and comments. Thank you to all our guests for this week, and also thank you to Vincenzo, my sound engineer, who made sure that we are sounding all right and tuning in from wherever we are in the world. And thank you to the SANTON Times team, as well as everyone on Mix 93.8 FM. Thank you for listening, and let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the SANTON Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.